fear is so great that you just want to get out of wherever you are. The whole world seems like it's just closing in on you, and whatever you're doing, I just have to stop and just go away.
I'm Nicole Johnson. Everyone knows what it's like to feel anxious sometimes, whether it's butterflies in your stomach before a job interview or being suspended high above a canyon on a very narrow bridge. But for 23 million Americans, anxiety is more than just a case of the nerves. Anxiety disorders include terrifying panic attacks or phobias that cause people to avoid certain places and situations. Many people go to the emergency room with symptoms like chest pain or shortness of breath when anxiety may be the real problem. But there's hope for people with anxiety disorders.
I first started experiencing anxiety, what I found out to be anxiety. I had just learned that I was carrying a child that may or may not live. Doctors recommended aborting the pregnancy. That threw me into an anxious cycle that the doctors had thought, well, we could break that within a week. I'll just give you some medication and that'll break that cycle. And that was not the result.
I think anxiety was crippling for me because I would tend to freeze up. I would tend to get very tense, and my thinking processes would blank out. I would not do any intelligent kind of thinking once I got really anxious.
Dr. Murray Stein is director of the Anxiety and Traumatic Stress Disorders program at the UCSD School of Medicine.
Everybody can experience anxiety from time to time in their lives. And in fact, it's quite normal to experience anxiety before an exam, before a job interview. But some people experience anxiety that is either way out of keeping to the kind of situation that they're experiencing, and some people even have anxiety that just occurs for no apparent reason. It's really out of the blue. And it's important to contrast those two kinds of anxiety. The first is clearly quite normal. The other probably isn't. People who have anxiety in situations where it's clearly abnormal to have it have what we call an anxiety disorder. Within the anxiety disorders, it's not a uniform condition either. People can have phobias, which are irrational fears of objects or places. Within that, people can have specific phobias. Specific phobias are fears of, common things would be fears of spiders or snakes or heights. There are other kinds of phobias. People can have what's called social phobia. It sounds like, they're afraid of parties or something. Truly what they're afraid is being scrutinized or watched by other people. They will avoid many situations where they have to interact with other people, talk to other people, because they're afraid they're going to do or say something to make themselves look stupid. Then we have agoraphobics. People with agoraphobia usually suffer from an illness called panic disorder. And what they have are these recurrent, unexpected anxiety attacks, sometimes out of the blue, where their heart races, they get short of breath, they get tremulous, and usually they have no idea why it's happening, which makes it doubly frightening. When they start having these in different situations, they try and make sense of it and go, why in the heck am I having this horrible anxiety attack? Maybe it has something to do with where I am, and maybe if I avoid, if it happened in a supermarket, if I avoid supermarkets, I'm not going to have them. If it happens in church, if I avoid church, maybe it won't happen. And they start to avoid a whole bunch of different situations, develop what we call phobic avoidance. People who try and avoid a whole bunch of different situations in order to try and prevent themselves from having panic attacks have agoraphobia.
Attack is the most terrifying thing that I ever went through. Still go through. And the only way to control it is with medication. I don't even know if I breathe. All I know is my legs shake, my voice shakes, my knees knock. Standing on line in Ralph's, like there would be a cart in front of me, and I'm the next cart, and there's people behind me. I can't go nowhere, and boom. I leave that card in the aisle and I'm out the door.
So a sense of being trapped?
Exactly.
You can bring on anxiety attacks merely by being scared to have one. And that's what I was doing for a very long time. I was so frightened to have one that I would bring it on.
As a therapist and president of the San Diego Phobia Foundation, Leslie Fadum sees negative self-talk as a contributor to anxiety.
The thoughts that or statements a person might have or say to themselves are, what if? What if I go back to the grocery store? Oh my God, I can't do that. This is what, and then that computer disk comes forward. This is what happened to me last time. I was so embarrassed. I had to leave my groceries, grab my kids, go tearing out. I'm not going back. I'm not going to risk having that kind of trauma again. So then the more one avoids, the more serious it becomes, to the extreme of becoming agoraphobic, somebody who's really afraid to leave their home or their safety zones, who's really very, very concerned about humiliating themselves in public.
At the end of my pregnancy, for example, I had to have an amniocentesis. Well, an amniocentesis is what started the whole situation to begin with. So when they had to take me down to that room to do another amniocentesis, I just lost it. I just literally felt like the walls were closing in on me. My chest was pounding really hard. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. My breathing was just totally erratic. I felt very faint. You could clearly tell that I was sweating. And I couldn't explain it. It just was, this is where a bad episode happened that put me into what I didn't understand at the time was anxiety and phobias. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible.
The first time that I had it, the more appropriate adjective is a terror attack. I mean, it's unadulterated terror, and they put in things like, you know, my pulse races and my, you know, I start to breathe fast and things like that, but I don't recognize, those things are probably happening, but the terror is so great that everything that your body is doing doesn't matter. It's just, you just want to get out of wherever you are. The whole world seems like it's just closing in on you, and whatever you're doing, I just have to stop and just go away.
The physical sensations or symptoms are not dangerous unto themselves at all. They're not life-threatening. They're not dangerous. They're extremely uncomfortable. It's the associated thoughts and feelings that go with that are so terrifying. Some of those might be, I'm losing control. I'm going to make a fool of myself out in public, to extremes of feeling that they're going to literally black out, be unconscious, have a heart attack and die, go crazy and not be able to regain control.
When you're coming down from an anxiety attack, oftentimes you feel so isolated, like you're the only person that has a problem with it. Like you just don't belong here. I really thought I was losing my mind.
Anxiety disorders can burden a person's life as much as any physical illness can, but one need not suffer forever. There is help from trained professionals and from others who've experienced similar symptoms and have learned how to cope.
The first thing to do would be to go to your family physician and have a routine physical and rule out any other kind of physiological illness that this might be based from.
In the past couple of years, there's been, I think, a lot better education of, say, family physicians, emergency physicians, that panic disorder is now very well recognized, and I think people are much better off than they were in the past. They see a physician now. By and large, they get diagnosed. Not everybody needs treatment. You know, some people have mild forms of phobia. Somebody who has a snake phobia and has no reason to ever be near snakes doesn't need to run in and see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. But when the person realizes that their anxiety is interfering with their life, it's causing them to be unable to do things that they want to do, or causing them great distress just to do what they are doing, then they should consider seeking treatment. There are medications now that are primarily the antidepressants, which, you know, they're marketed usually for depression, but the truth is they're anti-anxiety agents too, are one of the treatments of choice. There's a newer class of antidepressants around called the SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. And there's several of them around. They tend to be very useful for treating most of the anxiety disorders. Well, the alternative is psychotherapy. And here we're not talking about the kind of psychotherapy where, you know, you lie on the couch and let's try and figure out what happened in your childhood that makes you the way you are now. The reason we don't do much of that anymore is mainly it doesn't work very well. You wind up with people who understand themselves better as people. They say, you know, my 18 years of therapy was very useful, but I still have my panic attacks. So the therapies that we use now are much more specific, sort of focal, often brief therapies. The term that people tend to use for them is either cognitive therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. And these are treatments which are partly educational in nature. Let's teach the person about the illness. And then what they do is help the person to look at how their reactions to their anxiety can make things worse, and give them a set of tools, teach them ways for managing their own anxiety.
And that's what the cognitive behavioral treatment will do. We'll focus in specifically and help one identify what are those triggers, what are those anticipatory thoughts that will then go into the physiological reactions. Some of the specific tools that we teach either in individual therapy and also that we work on in the free support groups are the cognitive behavioral tools that I mentioned. There are a variety of those. Some include learning the relaxation breathing, which is a deep breathing.
When I became aware of how shallow my breathing was and how fast I was breathing, and then when I started doing the deep breathing, that helped quite a bit.
Visualization, being able to imagine yourself in a peaceful spot, just feeling yourself someplace where you feel safe.
Just little techniques like visualizing a stop sign, as vivid as the red and then the perfect white. Sometimes that can stop your train of thinking.
Sometimes we might use, for overcoming different kinds of phobias, desensitization. Not in that frightening place, not in the airport as you're about to necessarily go on the plane, but in your therapist's office or in a group where you can actually think gradually of each step, you know, even the thought of going to the airport that day and using your breathing, using your visualizations, relaxing each step of the way.
Turns out that the medication treatments and the cognitive behavioral therapies are both very good. If you pick panic disorder, for example, probably about 80–85% of people will respond very well to either.
I love treating anxiety disorders because they are treatable.
San Diego therapist Shirley Babior has written a self-help book called Overcoming Panic, Anxiety, and Phobias.
We want to get a list of all the things that they're afraid of, whether they approach them or whether they avoid them. And then we know that's a list that after we teach them how to challenge their thoughts and we help them relax their body, we're going to begin to gradually expose them to. You lock a person in the room and they have to stay there, and you haven't taught them the cognitive therapy, and they don't know how to comfort and soothe themselves and have faith that they're going to be all right. It'll be a terrible experience. So we go slow. We first teach the cognitive behavioral strategies, and then we gradually do the exposure. It's such a wonderful feeling when I'm working with someone and they get to the point where they used to say, I can't do this, and they cross over to I can.
Many people coping with anxiety disorders get valuable help from support groups, such as those offered free of charge by the San Diego Phobia Foundation.
People often who've suffered for a long time, unfortunately, don't even believe that there is that hope, but there is. They share their cognitive and behavioral tools. They talk about medications they may or may not be using. They talk about their spirituality and how that's impacting them and helping them to cope with what feels like such an overwhelming problem, and know that, wow, there is really a possibility of getting well. And people do.
I think most people don't think they're going to find their way out. But to be able to find other people who have found their way through this and can reassure you, yeah, you know, it's a growth process, and you're learning how to cope in a whole new way, and you're learning how to accept yourself and accept life in a different way.
The quality of your life does not have to be compromised because you suffer from anxiety, agoraphobia, panic attacks, anything. It doesn't have to be unless you choose for it to be. there is help out there.
I guess one of the main things that helps me with dealing with the anxiety is just trusting God, you know, using my faith, especially about the things that I don't have control over. You know, where I used to worry and do the what-if thinking, you know, if I had a dental appointment or something, or a situation, you know, now I'm just kind of turning things over, and so that's helped me a lot with the anxiety.
Life is more meaningful to me now, whereas before I was just trying to get more and sort of driven in my life. Now I'm more here in my life today, whereas before I was very future-oriented and always feel like I was rushing someplace.
Our bodies and our souls, our minds need to be replenished. And when we are so busy that we can't stop and reflect, the anxiety a lot of times is a way of our body telling us, hey, slow down. And if we don't listen to that, of course, the anxiety is going to continue.
Through this, I've found out that I actually need to be more reliant on God on a daily basis, and maybe I'm not so clear about what it is I should be doing, but I have more faith that each day I'm going to get the guidance that I need.
You have to be willing to face the fear and do it anyways, and reach out and look for help, because there is help out there. You really get what you put into things, and if you open up and take the chance of making yourself vulnerable and showing other people where you're at and what you need help with, you can't help but go up from there. You just can't.
There's an old saying that the word fear is actually an acronym for false evidence appearing real. And there may be some truth to that. We will admit to being afraid, but very often of things that don't exist, we've never experienced, or we've only heard about. We took a tour around San Diego and asked a few people, what are you afraid of?
Terrorists and things ain't going right in the world. And then when I was walking down there, I get scared of snakes down in that canyon. So that's about it.
Have you ever come across a snake?
Not,
At least none that crawl.
no.
I'm afraid of ghosts.
Ghosts?
Yeah, I'm
Like
afraid
any
of
particular ghost?
No, it's just any ghost.
Any ghosts?
Yeah, I'm just afraid of ghosts.
Have you come across any?
No.
You haven't?
No, but I'm afraid. It's just, you know.
Why?
Well, I heard people talk about it, so I'm afraid of the dark. Let's just say that, yeah, the dark.
The dark? And you think ghosts hang out in the dark? Right?
I wouldn't call it fear, but a little worry I have is that recently we just have a 1-month born son, and my worry is that you know, I want to be able to provide for my family, and you know, if something ever happened to me, I want to make sure that, you know, they'll be okay.
Someone taking my children.
Have you always felt that way?
No, because when I was growing up, I mean, we could play out at night and not be afraid of anything, and now it's like I can't even send my kids outside during the day without me being constantly there. So it's just a matter, I guess, like you say, fear of what might go on.
What really causes you to be afraid?
Roller coaster. A roller coaster? Yeah, I like the way, you know, they move very fast and turn immediately or something like that.
Have you ever been on a roller coaster?
Since I was a kid.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Do you think you'll ever try to face that fear? Do you think you'll ever dare yourself to get aboard a roller coaster and see what will happen? What are you afraid of?
Mostly the government lying to me.
What government? What lies?
This government. Well, a lot of things. It doesn't tell the truth about a lot of things. You find out 20 years later. Kennedy assassination, King assassination, Roswell, that goes on and on.
Maybe some people are afraid that we can't handle the truth.
Yeah, probably some people are. Like the movie, Jack Nicholson said the movie. You know, can you handle the truth?
Well, can you?
I might be able to. I don't think most people can, though.
You're not afraid of it?
Not really. I think the truth will set you free. The best thing to know is the truth.
Automobiles, automobile accidents.
Why? Why are you afraid of cars?
Because I was involved in a terrible accident when I was younger.
Hey, do you get inside cars at all?
Very rarely.
Very rarely. So how do you get around?
The bus. That's why I'm at a bus stop.
Really? You ever travel across country at all?
No, I'm only comfortable in cars if I'm driving now.
I'm afraid of talking in front of large groups of people.
Really? Why?
I don't know, it just seemed like all those people looking at you, it just makes me nervous.
So how do you deal with that fear? How do you overcome it?
I think talking to people, talking to speakers who have spoken and just kind of getting a feel for it and watching them and just being more relaxed.
And facing your fear.
Right, facing your fear.
And there were several others we talked to who said they also have fears. Television cameras.
Between the group and God and my doctor and some help from some medication, it's coming together real well.
To recover, you need to take a different attitude to life and to really be a different kind of faith in God, realizing that God is going to take care of a lot of things and we don't have to be so responsible.